Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome on behalf of Cayenne Wellness Center to our mini seminar, The Language of Drugs is actually part 2. On behalf of Dr. Carolyn Rowley, I'd like to extend a warm welcome and thank you all for participating. We're going to have our panelists to do their presentations. We ask that you put your questions in the chat. When we're finished with all the presentations, then we will have a panel discussion. We'll make sure that we get all of your questions answered, and we hope to have an engaging and robust discussion today. So without any further ado, we'll have our first panelist that will be presenting today, and that is Shirley Powell.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope your day is launching well. Again, I'm Shirley Powell. I am a sickle cell warrior. I have SC, a more severe version. I will be 70 in February. So that's far beyond what I was told my life expectancy would be. So I was diagnosed with sickle cell when I was 4 years old. I had been sick for the years before, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was 4 in 1960. And I suffered quite a bit with several hospitalizations throughout those first several years of my life. But when I was 33, a confluence of resources crossed my path. It was a divine intervention that led me to a holistic approach to life. So I changed my diet, my lifestyle, and I had a wonderful 25-year stretch of amazing health. Uh, the frequency of my hospitalizations reduced significantly. So I had 2 hospitalizations in a 25-year stretch. And people had questions about how did you do it, and I began to talk. And then I took a path towards getting becoming a doctor of naturopathy and began a practice, temple care, and served multiple communities on the East Coast and some on the West Coast, including with Cayenne Wellness. I am now retired, though, so I'm venturing into other paths. So I was asked to talk about basically 3 areas, and first tell you a little bit about pain, what what my experience has been with pain, crises, and other types of secondary pain issues related to sickle cell and how that has impacted different areas of my life. So I've had pain crises. I began when I turned 60, I began to have crises again more frequently and other secondary issues. Uh, Avascular necrosis in my shoulders and hips, which creates a chronic pain condition. The pain that I've experienced it varied tremendously. Sometimes I would have a pain episode that was concentrated in my legs only, sometimes in my arms only, sometimes in my abdomen, my back, uh, or just generalized. And The type of pain would vary, but you could always recognize sickle cell pain from other types of pain. It's hard to even describe, but it can be it definitely is excruciating because managing it often requires hospitalization, um, usually receiving intravenous opioids and oxygen through an IV drip, the pain and saline uh, water IV drip. So uh, the pain can be sharp and searing. It can feel like bone crushing, like you're being run over by a truck. That kind of excruciating pain. It could be stabbing. It could be intense, very intense, pulsating, throbbing, like your whole body is being jerked severely. So it really varies. Um, Stabbing, uh, just extreme, whatever form it comes in, it's usually often pretty extreme. And I try to catch it before it gets to that level. So fortunately, where I get my health care now, I can go to something called a day hospital and get an infusion to try to avoid total hospitalization. And that has worked at least 50% of the time. But the pain definitely impacts sleep, quality of sleep, especially the secondary pain, the chronic pain from avascular necrosis. And I've also have some neurological issues that I've developed in the past few years, peripheral neuropathy and restless leg. And I've been able to manage that. Fortunately, I tried a multitude of holistic, natural, alternative uh, therapies that didn't have lasting effectiveness. So I take a medication called gabapentin and for that issue. My AVN pain is a different kind of pain, but it's very disconcerting. It interferes mostly with my sleep. When I first had it, I thought when I first experienced the pain from it, I thought I had frozen shoulders, so I was going to chiropractics, acupuncture, which have been really helpful for me at other times, but it didn't resolve this issue, so they recommended an MRI, which I got, and that's when I learned I had avascular necrosis in the hips and shoulders, and I got a shoulder replacement in 2015, and the fitting that was on the East Coast, the fitting was wrong, so I just actually had another reverse right shoulder replacement in June 3rd. And so far so good. I've been able to avoid having this replacement surgery in the other shoulder and hips so far, and I'm feeling good. It affects my mobility to a degree, I think, along with age, the uh, the peripheral neuropathy and the avascular necrosis in my hips have affected my balance a little. It hasn't, I've been self-employed, so with work, I've been able to control my environment. When I have worked in offices, sometimes the air conditioning would be so cold, I couldn't maintain an employment in that environment, um, for without going into great detail there, but just generally speaking. As far as the impact on the quality of my life, um, for the most part, I try to live large and travel and do the things I love to do. Music, outdoor concerts, social engagements, and I still do quite a bit of that. There have been times when that's been disrupted with a pain episode. Was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, for example, on vacation and ended up in the hospital there for 4 days. So it has disrupted events, but overall, I feel that I have a good quality of life. I have like we all know to be extra careful not to overdo it and overexert ourselves. For me, it's been kind of a moving target, so I've had to really be super keen about um, being attentive and listening to my body. And the impact emotionally for crisis can be pretty tough, because you can develop a sense of, oh, when you start to get small signs, oh my goodness, please, no, not today. And sometimes you have to just honor that and maybe cancel an outing or something that you had committed to. And I give people notice, when I become close and we to people and plan things. I have to have a caveat to allow for a last minute change. So the pain for me and the episodes have evolved over time. When I had them a lot more frequently when I was young. And like I said, I had that long stretch with only 25-year stretch with only two hospitalizations. Not saying I didn't have some pain, but only two times did I require hospitalization. And since I've turned 60, I've kind of had begun to have more challenges again. I manage it differently now because I have the opiates at home. I can manage it better. Of course, learning as you grow older and wiser how to meet your particular needs during pain episodes. But it does have an impact. It creates kind of an apprehensiveness, um, especially if you feel like you have to go to the hospital or ER. And it can be really frustrating when you have to cancel things and your plans change. It can be very disheartening. And we have to develop skills to manage that. And that's something that I think some of the other panelists can talk more detail about. With the time that I have, I'll try to focus on some of the emotional trauma, some of the stigma, and some of the tools that we can utilize. So, sickle cell can be, quite traumatic emotionally, especially as you live longer and you become an adult, and your parents are no longer with you. The whole experience shifts. When you have to go to the emergency room, it's anybody's guess what can happen. It can be a horrific experience, and I've had my share of being turned away, which is traumatizing, really troubling, and can be devastating, or given insufficient pain relief. I was about three years ago. I had an episode at a hospital in Colton, and I had a letter from my doctor saying this is what I need, but they disregarded it and gave me 1/10 of what I needed, which didn't scratch the surface at all. I've been turned away. I've been told that you just have diarrhea. I mean, excuse me, constipation, all kinds of things. I've been kicked out of the hospital after being in ICU to a nursing home who wasn't prepared to receive me. There was a conflict of interest. The doctor who tried to send me there was actually the director of this nursing home, and I was fortunate enough to have my son come and pick me up. It was horrible. That's a story in and of itself, but these are the kinds of things that we warriors have to contend with. The the other challenge we face is the stigma with opiates, especially since the opiate crisis in the United States. We've had opiates. I've always had morphine and different other types of opiates to manage pain episodes. But today, it's really been stigmatized. And when we go to the ER, oftentimes we're labeled as drug seekers, especially because most of us are people of color. And so there's that added layer of racism. And so it can be really challenging. And that's where some of the frustration and fear and anxiety can kick in because you just don't know what you're going to contend with and needing opiates to relieve your pain. And so, because of the culturalization of shaming, there's a level of internalized shame that we can experience if we're not careful. We may be become ashamed of our need for opiates for pain relief. And so there's also issues because of the opiate crisis or epidemic around friend groups and other people you may interact with. So I find myself having to explain sickle cell and how pain management works, and that only less than 1% of warriors are addicted to opioids. And so it can be really rough. I've had some bad experiences even with this year with my first pain management doctor, and he wanted to throw me under the bus for needing opioids. So I immediately said I never want to see that doctor again and was referred to a palliative care doctor who was amazing. She was, because palliative care has a whole different mindset, and they are a person and family oriented and centered approach with people who may have different life limiting illnesses, and they focus on improving the quality of life. And so that's been really helpful for me. The um, other thing I want to mention while I have some time left is some of the therapy, talk a little bit about therapy, about faith, and reclaiming my story. So, I have had the privilege, beginning with Cayenne Wellness, to receive a therapy from people of color who are focused on who can focus on the sickle cell community and understand the peculiarities and particularities that we face uh, emotionally and mentally. And I think it's been very helpful for improving the the mindset, improving, overcoming some of the fear, some of the limiting thoughts, and refocusing, reframing, and re- having a sense of validation, normalizing some of your emotions, how to process them out, and helping you to make some paradigm shifts and connecting the dots and increasing the capacity for self compassion, which is hugely important and for everybody, but particularly us warriors. I think support groups have been tremendously helpful. I have only been engaging in support groups since I moved to California 10 years ago and maybe 6 years ago through Cayenne Wellness. And I find that very helpful because you're with a group of people who have the same unique challenges to share with. They get it and they have a similar experience. You feel heard and understood, and you can compare notes and encourage each other, have some insights, information, share information. Also, workshops, seminars, and the summits, I think, have been tremendously helpful to feel connected and heard and overcome that sense that you're not in this alone. And it's hugely beneficial for mental and emotional health, the support groups and those workshops and seminars. Um, as far as pain management, I try to take a holistic approach. From hearing a lot of warriors, we really don't want to take these prescription pain meds. And sometimes we just have to, but the uh, I don't try to wait until it's gets to the point past the point of no return, but I will take them because the emotional effect of experiencing extreme pain can actually exacerbate or increase your susceptibility to having a full-blown crisis. So we really want to stop the pain in its tracks before it, you know, gets out of the gate. But I also try to use other modalities such as mindfulness, which is really helpful, meditation, breathing exercises, and I like to do qigong or yoga because they really focus on breathing, and we know oxygen is so crucial for us. Rest, listening to our bodies and blinking. Of course, we hear 1,000 times, drinking plenty of water. Love music, and that always soothes my soul and brings me joy. I have a huge playlist for whatever mood I want to invoke, but I just love music. And sometimes, when you're not, when I'm not up to watching TV or even have the capacity to read a book, music really helps a lot. I take also sometimes for pain, especially my chronic pain, something called Curafin, which is a blend of two herbs, curcumin and boswellia, and that really helps. It's kind of similar to ibuprofen, but it's more natural. And so, because it's a supplement from extracts. I also use heating pads. I use topical pain balms like Dr. Bronner's that we often get at the summits that Kaya Wellness holds. Epsom salt baths are very, I like candles and putting music and soak and put a little essential oil in there. And like I said, I was referred to a palliative care doctor, and she just started me on, especially for mostly for my chronic pain, something called Belbuca, which is a buccal film, something you put in your cheek. It's not a pill or a liquid, and it dissolves, but the generic name is buprenorphine, and I have found it to be tremendously helpful. She explained to me that it actually like regular opioids can increase your pain sensitivity, whereas Belbuca or buprenorphine can block those cell receptors that activate a pain response. So it reduces your sensitivity to pain. And it has been working for me as uh, way very few side effects, way less than your standard opioids. So I'm glad to have that available to me and something you may want to explore and talk about. I think that there is fairly recent trend um, to incorporate Belbuca or buprenorphine in the treatment of sickle cell pain, especially chronic pain. But also, the one of the other tools I use is faith. I think, and there have been studies to show that faith or some kind of spiritual connection makes a big difference in your overall health and well-being, whether it's through religion, generic, secular. It helps to give us a sense of, gives me a sense of hope, perspective, and big picture thinking around life, the value of life, my own value, that I'm loved, that there's a source, a guide, energy of love, however you relate to it best and resonates with you. Grasp onto it because it makes a huge difference in how you experience life overall, how you frame your experiences of pain, episodes, or chronic pain, and how you look at that in the context of your whole life. So it sense of surrendering, for me, God can carry my load, help me, guide me, lead me, relieve me. And that really is helpful. Inner peace, a sense of inner peace, and a sense of hope and optimism. And lastly, I'd like to just talk about reclaiming my story because we are told what our story is to be by especially the medical community, but even outside of that, like like I said, I was given a life expect. I was told I wouldn't live to be a teenager, and I'm almost 70 now. And I've been enjoying my life in every way I can. My motto is I'm going to live, not just exist, but I'm going to live until I die. I'm going to live to the fullest measure without hurting myself, without overdoing it, without activating a pain episode. So, we've been given this life expectancy. I've also, in my family, was labeled the sickly one. So I had to reframe all of this and reclaim my own story and create my own narrative and shift the focus. And you know, think about all that I am. That's great, you know, all my characteristics. So we want to look at what our value is, that we have a testimony of being strong, of being resilient, being overcomers, how we have used these to grow and be stronger and wiser, and to even be able to help other people. We can remember, focus on what's good, and hunt for the good. Recognize our own good, our values, our accomplishments, our morals, our achievements, our strengths, our the personality characteristics that other people enjoy about us, um, the contributions we've made, our special endeavors, and the ways we self-express, the creative uh, talents we may have. So we don't need sickle cell disease to define us. We can create the narrative for our life, and that we are not the disease. Um, we frame a life with that, but not being about that. We can be empowered. We can make a statement to the world around us that we are so much more. We can focus on what we have to give, what we've learned, um, and we use it to express ourselves and our self empowerment to the world around us, and therefore be an encouragement and be a light in spite of. So I thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit about myself and my story, and how some of the snippets about how I manage living with sickle cell disease.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. That was powerful. Trust me, I have a lot of questions. We're going to have a robust discussion. We got a lot of things that you said that we're going to unpack a little bit deeper. And so,
Okay.
without any further ado, we'll bring Noah up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Noah James. I am a Bay Area born native with sickle cell disease. I am also deaf and hard of hearing. I am a dedicated advocate and educational liaison for the San Francisco Sickle Cell Anemia Awareness Association. Excuse me, Sickle Cell Anemia Awareness in San Francisco. And I also partner with Kaya Wellness and the Sickle Cell Consortium. I'm a seasoned dancer, development associate at Shaw Anderson, and I also just try to bring passion and purpose to everything that I do. I have been tasked to speak about when pain is louder than words and how to navigate having sickle cell, and for me, being deaf and hard of hearing. Many of us with sickle cell don't just have sickle cell, we have other challenges that we have to live through. Some of us may have to use a wheelchair or, can't see it as well, um, and many other things. And so I'm going to touch on a little bit about what it was like for me as a child, the different communication barriers that I face with pain, as well as the emotional toll of not being believed, especially in places like the hospital. And uh, even amongst friends and family, I'll say a little bit about healing through dance, journaling, mental health support, and building community and partnerships for visibility. So, growing up as a child, um, I knew very early on that I had sickle cell disease. Um, my mom often would tell me that there would be times as a baby that I would cry nonstop, and she didn't know all the time like what to do. And so, when I went to the hospital, and my grateful for the hematology program at the hospital that I was growing up in, it was nice. It was full of education and tools and information to live with this disease, and it was almost like a little bubble, a protective bubble, to get through the different stages um, as I grew. And so I think I can remember and recall like pain crises uh, as a toddler, even as a teenager and as a young adult. Um, in those moments, I think I often I often tease this opioid epidemic that we have in America because I was exposed to long-acting morphine or morphine as a drug itself for pain control when I was 6. And even then, the way that they gave it to me was quite aggressive to the point to where it became an allergy for me and it was just too much. And what I mean by that is that they gave me far too much. They would often do something called a PCA pump, which basically means when you feel the pain to push a button. And um, we could talk more about that a little later. But when it's at its peak level at that time, I would just push the button. And I'm like, okay, this is not working. And then I just had a horrible experience to where there was like hallucinations and just uncomfortable, scary feeling. And so I only knew to do what um, Miss Powell, Dr. Powell was saying earlier, which was to pray because I come from a faith-based family. And so once my mom realized that I was praying, she was like, okay, he's okay, but you have him on too much medication. And so that for us was when we started to try to work against and question and ask as many questions as possible about the medication that they would like to use to treat sickle cell and to treat pain. And so it was it was hard. It was hard. When I became a teenager, let's say through high school, things kind of settled down just a bit, but at that point, I was trying to keep up with my class. I was trying to play all the sports, do all the things, and that hub, that hematology group, kept telling me, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And in my head, I'm like, well, why not? I understand that it may lead to pain, but why are you putting parameters around this? And like Ms. Powell mentioned, like they told me, well, you may not even live to C21 or to C25. And so in my head, I'm like, well, since I have these limitations and you're saying I can't do these things, I'm going to try to do it anyway because I hate to have any regrets in life. And I don't want to have this restricted lived experience because you're telling me it's dangerous. To be fair, there were some things that I just shouldn't do, that I shouldn't have done, like jumping in the cold water or trying to play soccer when my body was not built to be an athlete. But that's neither here nor there. Get to 18 and we're transitioning out of hematology into, um, at this point, it wasn't called young adult care. It was just you're now an adult. And they didn't have my hospital didn't have a strong transitional program. So I volunteered to give constant feedback in that space because with me being deaf and hard of hearing, oftentimes there were some challenges in communications with the doctors that I would meet in these settings like ER. And for me and what those challenges for me I felt were like they were not listening to what I was saying, or if they would ask me a question, I would give them the very clear answer like, well, what's your pain level? I would say, well, my pain level is a 7. Well, what does it feel like? I'll give them the descriptions and everything like that. And then for whatever reason they still wouldn't believe that I was in pain and or act as if the things that I was saying didn't make sense to them. And so I had to really just lean on my family and my support system to advocate and help advocate for me, which for me at that point was being in the space. being someone who could reiterate or repeat some of the things that I was saying. Um, I think got to a point where sometimes I couldn't even speak. All I can do was moan and groan. And I'll transition into how this impacted me emotionally. Oftentimes, I feel like we face racism and just negative treatment for folks who feel as if their 3 chapters of sickle cell education is enough to treat a disease. And oftentimes, I felt provoked and felt, in spaces where, like, for example, quick story, um, I felt pain in my chest, and 3 times they told me that it was just gas. And I kept coming back to ER, kept coming back to the hospital. And I said, no, this doesn't feel like gas. I'm having problems breathing. This pain is above a 7. It's not moving. When I breathe, it's hard. And they said, no, it's gas. We're sure of it. Go home. The final time, and at this point, I'm frustrating my family because they're starting to believe it's also gas. We get there, and I say, okay, well, could you at least do all of the scans to really try to see what's inside of my chest? And they discovered that it was a pulmonary aneurysm. Oh, that word, aneurysm, I think that's it, where there's a blood clot in your lungs. And if they didn't catch it at the time that they did, it could have led to other unfortunate news. And in that moment, I was frustrated, very angry, very disappointed and sad because I felt as if I could have died if I believed that I only had gas in my chest, which I knew better. And and not only that, there was no recovery from their end. There was no apology. There was no, there was just like, okay, now you have a blood clot in your lungs. And almost every other week, there was a new doctor coming in to treat me without information being passed to them on their in the internal space. Like no one was passing enough information from one doctor to the other. I would often have to reintroduce myself and also reshare where I am in the treatment process and how I got there and etc. It was a mess. And so I feel like several things I learned in that space where things can be frustrating, or if I am in so much pain and my voice is so small and I can't speak loud enough for someone to hear, um, my mom would often say, "You can't scream, you can't um, be angry or throw something or flip the table and all these things." And for me, it just felt unfair because you're expecting me to bear the pain, to not scream and wail and moan, to be respectful and have the utmost compassion for all of these folks around me when I'm the one who's needing the care and the attention um, and the support, really. Um, so that's a good example. One example, one emotion, just frustration in that space when I wasn't believed, and it was just hard to trust the diagnoses of these doctors sometimes, and so I learned to question things, to do my own research, to suggest certain things when it comes to how to treat things. And so mid-20s, I started to develop an interest in the healthcare system and wanted to learn more about it. So I did go to school to get more education, get my certification in healthcare administration. And in that, I was exposed to more language and just more things on the back end about how to navigate the healthcare space. Um, and so I started to become a little aggressive about um, how to live in a state of healing, in a state of recovery, even if the sickle cell won't necessarily go away. And so when I was 25, they said, okay, well, Noah, you made it to 25, but unfortunately, we have some bad news for you. Your bones are decaying. You have bone infarcts, or for some, another version of ABN. And not only that, it's in your spine, it's in your hips, it's in your femurs, and it's in your knees. So basically, head to toe, the bones are decaying and the pain just got worse. And so, what I started to do is I couldn't do at this point I was a professional dancer, so I couldn't dance anymore and I had to dance less. And like Miss Power mentioned, lean into breath work, into yoga, stretching, into movement, uh, and into honoring the capabilities when it feels like the pain is so debilitating that I can only take a step or two, and or use assistive devices like canes and etc. And so I started journaling to deal with the frustrations and the emotions and all of what I was feeling when I was hitting these pivotal moments in my life, as I grew, as I age. I'm 35 now. And I think through therapy and through processing all of how this has made me feel, um, then and even now, I have found I find that it's easier when you have a space to share with someone who can just listen and also help you process and understand certain emotions. And so I say that to say when you go into hospital settings or if you don't have a therapist, always keep a journal, always keep a notebook, record your experiences, record how things make you feel, and also describe the pain. Get creative about different ways to articulate. Like she said, it could be crushing, or for me, I would always say it feels like an elephant is trampling on my body, and everything is just into like shattered pieces, like broken pieces. When you get to a space to where you can articulate pain in a way that doesn't sound just like just one way, I feel like people can appreciate that more. My family, my mom, and other caretakers, even therapists, are able to get images and pictures as to your experience. And just want to conclude with I think for me, in terms of building community and partnerships, it's so important to have other people that you can share your life with, other warriors that you could grow with and learn from. I still have many friends that I'm so grateful to have experienced. Who have transitioned in this battle and this journey with sickle cell, and some who what we say here now is golden warriors who have been able to have years and years of life, and it just makes this journey with sickle cell not so hard and lonely and or just isolating. You'll be able to, when you connect with other warriors and your support system, you'll be able to navigate a little bit easier, um, and achieve some of those dreams and goals that you may have, and also learn more about how to live well with this disease, like she said, how to not just exist but to thrive. And I think that's just the best way to grow and to sustain yourself and your life in these years versus having extreme moments or doing like you did when you were a kid, when challenging those things, some of those things. And yeah, thank you for this moment. And I want to say uh, I appreciate Kaya Wellness for holding these conversations, and I look forward to the question and answer period.
Noah, thank you. That was so powerful. Trust me, you guys are giving me a lot of fuel for a really great panel discussion. Just hang in there. We're gonna get there. So next up, we're gonna have Nilda.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I listening to both Shirley and Noah, it gives me nostalgic and memories, because even though we have the same illness, we have a lot of many similarities, whether our complications might be different or equal. We all have different experiences with it. So my name is Nilda Navedo. I am a Hispanic individual with sickle cell, and it's SS with persistent F. My parents are from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. I say that because my upbringing with pain has been a different journey. It has been a very holistical journey because I was not introduced to the pain meds that children nowadays are more familiar with. So I am happy to say that I am 48. When I turned 48, it was a blessing, but at the same time, it came with a mental. I want to say depression. Depression exists in our community because I have had many rough years, but I think this last year has been my most difficult. Since we're in the topic of discussing pain, my first memory of pain was when I was 7 years old and I had acute chest syndrome. I have a vivid memory of having both arms out because they were doing an exchange transfusion at the time, and it was a nurse pulling out from one arm and the other nurse was transfusing in. And at that time, I remember an oxygen mask. Remember, I couldn't talk. It was hard to move. And that is my first memory of pain. And then as the years started and I became a teenager, I had broken my femur riding a bike. So the simplicity that children ride bikes, Nilda falls. And guess what? Nilda breaks the one of the hardest bones in the body. So right there and then I knew of sickle cell, but because we didn't have social media and it was more literal literacy, we had pictures, but I didn't have that image of what is sickle cell. So I truly didn't understand what my condition was growing up. And even to this day, I remember that I had friends that would say, Nilda has to take a break, or Nilda hurts. And I would say, yes, I heard I can probably play, but not play and do the entire session of recess because I would have trouble breathing. And I had friends that were my advocates at the time without even knowing. So I grew up with necrosis being one of my most challenges. And then I went into pulmonary complications. So younger years, my hospitalizations were acute chest, the vascular crisis. Teenage years, it was joints, it was broken femur. I then had to have a hip replacement. My knee collapsed before I was 20. And then in the early 20s, then I started having pulmonary issues. And I had a pulmonary embolism at the age of 22. What I couldn't understand is I went to the hospital having difficulty breathing, and I was unable to walk when I exited the hospital. And I didn't understand why. It was a struggle, and I was a newlywed at the time. And it was such a struggle for me to say, wait a minute, I went into the hospital with shortness of breath. Why is it that I can't walk? And the amount of steroids that I received caused my joints to collapse. It basically like ignited a flame in regards to my necrosis, and my bones collapsed to the point that for my hygiene, I was having very difficult time with hygiene. I couldn't even put a fist in between the width. That was the width of between my legs. I couldn't even put a fist. It was very frozen. It's what they call, frozen joints, frozen shoulders. So I had to have a hip replacement at the age of 21. And there started then more complications from that pulmonary embolism. However, I want to go back to growing up because even though I was dealing with these complications, my relationship with pain was very different on managing pain. There, there's this understanding to where in our family we would not speak of what was going inside the home. It was just the family that knew, but everyone knew Nilda as the sickly child. And I had a cousin that passed away at the age of 20 with sickle cell. Therefore, that was a suffering in my family. But what we used to do to manage our pain are being in the tub and soaking and having the green alcohol and menthol in our feet. Put menthol in our feet, put on a sock, and that helps with your chest with coughing. Till this day, I still don't know how, but it works. And because I grew up in a home that had a very holistical approach, that is how I manage my pain today. So anytime that I have a crisis, I am thinking to which complication am I dealing with now? So now, as the age of 48, I have had 14 surgeries, and I want to say it's definitely above double digits of complications. I have complications with majority of my organs for the exception of my pancreas. I have a medical team because sickle cell is a multidisciplinary illness. And we have to remember that although we have an illness that is genetic and inflicts pain, we also have to manage each organ. And all of us are different, and all of us have we might have different complications. We might have, therefore, commonalities of many of us may have AVS, but not all of us may have developed pulmonary hypertension. Not all of us may require to use oxygen. But I feel that when you start to learn about your body, you start learning what also helps it and how to heal. And food is a primary source when discussing healing. Also, herbal methods of healing. I I use, so let's put for an example, for sciatic pain, there's elements that I use. So I use capsaicin because it provides heat. I use camphor, it has anti-inflammatory effects. And I have little mix and matches of herbal remedies, whether it's arnica, menthol, camphor, liniments, Asian oils, lidocaine. Everything has a purpose. And once you learn the pain of each complication, you are able to provide what can alleviate the pain. It doesn't remove the pain, but it definitely alleviates it. I have learned even with teas, there are certain herbs that have pain and healing properties. So the teas might help in soothing. And it's, to me, I feel it's probably like a sensory distraction, same as we might use music to be a distraction when having a crisis. For me, it's also how I feel, the heat, an example of icy hot. So I think it's a sensory distraction that alleviates our pain. And growing up with parents that morphine is the last resort. So to give morphine to my child, it was not an option for my parents. They didn't have the information to state that this is due to her illness, and addiction is sometimes put into the conversation. So parents have this fear, and therefore the only thing I knew growing up was, as far as medication, was the pink bubble gum, penicillin, and the medicines I had to take every day, the folic acid and pen-BK. But other than that, when it dealt with pain management, it had to do with ointments. I I wake up with pain every day. Pain is not it's not a relationship that's ever ended. I feel that there are times that my pain is so intense that it becomes comforting. And I'm not sure if if you all can understand me in this, but there's sometimes that the pain has a type of stabbing and throbbing to it, to where mentally you settle into that throbbing and you start doing the deep breathings, and you have a connection to this pain. And it's an odd thing, because I think that's where I start rocking my body or having the moanings. It's part of me coping with the intense pain that I have. So water, which I heard Noah say that he hasn't jumped in a pool and that can bring up a flare up. Water to me is very soothing in regards to pain. Right now there are float pods which have a lot of salt in it, and the salt they said helps with anti-inflammatory. But I do get in the pool. My thing is I have to acclimate, so I cannot jump in. I It takes about 15 minutes while everybody has already jumped in the pool and they're having a great time. It takes me 15 minutes to get in, because I have to wait for each part of my body to acclimate. And once it acclimates, then that's how I can reduce the possibility of a flare up. And I learned that because I used to get crisis even in the shower. I wasn't able to shower and not have a pain episode. And growing up, then I picked up and it was like, okay, wait a minute, it's the temperature shift. So I have vents closed, and I tell parents, have your vents closed. Do not have a door open when your child is showering. And as adults, try not to have a door open, because you're welcoming the draft from parts of your home. Do not open a shower curtain or a shower door and allow a draft to come in unless you've dried yourself. So it's those key points that remind me of what to do. And the same applies when I get into a pool, is make sure I dry myself, make sure that I don't stay with the wet clothes on. And I learned this through sickle cell camp. So ironically, in sickle cell camp, they did polar bear swimming, and this was in Connecticut, so it was cold. And I was like, Mom, like I was able to get in the pool, and it was 5 in the morning. So that experience alone is what helped me think that I can do. And I feel that as sickle cell individuals, we need to take the I can't out, because we deal with pain, we know how to manage our bodies, but I think we can do a lot, and we are able to do so much with a smile on our face, and being able to not show what we're feeling inside, because externally nobody can ever tell the pains that we're having, but internally our body is just throbbing. Sometimes the throbbing gets so intense that you have to hold your breath. And speaking on the intensity of throbbing, we have to learn how to, I think it's a good idea to learn how to use the pain scale to describe our pain. I feel that many times we might think that we always are at a 10, but when you have different comorbidities alongside with sickle cell, sometimes there are other pains that are extremely intense. So learning how to use the pain scale and describing the type of pain assist with communicating to medical teams, because advocating for yourself is so important, and sometimes it's tiring as well. Is when you go to the hospital, we're not only the advocate, we are the instructors, we are the support system, we're educators, we're legal analysts, with documents, and we shouldn't be doing that while we are going to receive help at the hospital. We're there to receive care, and we're doing so much more. So it takes a toll on you, and that's where I say sometimes it can also put us in a depressive state, because many people do not understand us. And something that is truly important is to build a support system, whether it's your friends, your community, but also your family members. It's important to have individuals that know you, that know what works for you. always having your water nearby, always having an emergency kit, oxygen when you're going out. In summer days, it's electrolytes. So having individuals that know how to speak on your behalf, because when you are having these pain episodes, you cannot speak. I always invite others to show the pain. Sometimes in social media, we many individuals cannot relate because they're not seeing those moments when we're crying and when we cannot breathe and when we're curled up. So it's sickle cell. It's like, oh yeah, she has pain, but do you truly know what that pain is like? Sometimes the pain feels like if somebody's hammering your shin. It's an intense pain. It's hard to describe. But we use items that are so heavy, like a truck is on our body, and it's because that is the intensity of our pain. So I did bring a clip I wanted to share with you. Many times, not everybody has heard what a crisis sounds like, but if I can just share 20 seconds with you, because it's even hard for me to listen to it, but it can give you an idea of pain and what we go through. So if you don't a clip of what sickle cell pain can sound like or does sound like. You can't bend it at all. I'll pause because my family gets a little bit desperate on the voice memo. But that is the reason why I strongly suggest building a support system, because they're there at the times that the pain is that intense that you cannot speak. And sometimes, like I mentioned, you cannot breathe. And it's the sickle cell attacks our entire body. So there's an area that's not receiving oxygen. And that's the intensity of where that pain is. And also I will end by saying that's why we need to learn what can help the pain. And it is, aside from the pain medications that we have at home, learning to know what works for you in regards to the herbs that can also provide a relief, heat and cold and ointments to give those sensory distractions to our pain.
Nilda, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that very personal, emotional experience of going through pain. Only individuals who have sickle cell disease can understand that. And as family members or loved ones who are trying to help someone through that process is very, very difficult and emotional, as you have said. And we'll touch on that some more in the panel discussion. And so for our last panelist, Philip is joining us. So we will give him his time, and then we will all come back together and have, again, a very robust discussion. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's patience. Sickle cell, as you know, is unpredictable. Sometimes you can do all the right things and still end up with pain or fatigue or be otherwise sick. But yeah, I wanted to be able to address some of the things that that we go through. First of all, hi, my name is Philip Devon. I am a 40-year-old, as of this year, 40-year-old sickle cell warrior. I have sickle cell anemia SS, genotype SS. And my journey with the disease has been interesting because on one hand, I was very blessed in that I grew up with a higher percentage of fetal hemoglobin. Okay, so fetal hemoglobin being the blood from your mother's womb, that nurtures you and protects you when you are, an infant, basically protects you from infection, things of that nature. Having that higher percentage of fetal hemoglobin meant having a higher percentage of healthy red blood cells in my body. So as a child, it would be incorrect to say that I was asymptomatic, but I can say that I was able to do most things, and I was able to attend most days of school. I was able to perform in athletic activities, and I was able to, yeah, I had a couple of aches and pains every once in a while, but I really didn't see the inside of the hospital for myself too often. However, I'm of my, I've found family over the time, we talk about support systems. So I have a lot of extended, found family, but of my biological family that I grew up with, I only have one older sibling. And so my older sibling, Ray, he also has SS, and unfortunately, it was just a night and day difference. I mean, he just caught the brunt of it. He's 3 years older than me, so the way it worked was my parents, had him, and they weren't aware that they had traits. They weren't tested or anything back then. I'm an '85 baby, so my older brother, being an '82, my parents were just not tested at that time. So when they had Ray, they had this infant that was constantly screaming, constantly hollering, constantly crying, and they knew that that wasn't normal. So they, would bring him back and forth to the hospital. Eventually, some doctors found out that obviously he had sickle cell anemia, SS, and that both my parents had trait. And then that's where the education journey began. My mom was adamant, being one of 7, was adamant that she wasn't going to have an only child. Like, she always wanted there to be at least 2 of us. But they knew the risks, and they tried again. And when they had me, they had me tested right away. They figured I had the disease. I think they were very concerned, but it was just so strange growing up, because on one hand, I was just talking to my therapist about this, but on one hand, it was like Ray caught the brunt of everything. Hospitals, in and out of hospitals every year. Uh, Chronic pain episodes. Missed most days of school. I think when he was a senior in high school, he finally knew what it was to attend most of the days of school. I don't like it, just happened on a fluke, I guess. Maybe he got good enough care at the hospital at the time, but I remember him saying, "Wow, it makes a huge difference. Doing the homework is so much easier when you actually are able to attend the classes that explain how this stuff works." And it was just miraculous for him. Um, as I got older, would have less um, less fetal hemoglobin. The percentage would go down over time. My body would deplete it and not reproduce it. So when I was about 15, my parents got divorced, and I moved to Michigan with my dad. And about a year in, around age 16 or so, I really did have my first like full blown sickle cell pain crisis. And when I tell you, going from being a very active kid with occasionally got the sniffles or whatever, to suddenly this intense pain hits, and it's very traumatizing. Um, to not be prepared for it, to not really know what it was like. I mean, it was traumatizing enough to grow up hearing my brother down the hall, um, screaming like, I wish God would just kill me. Um, I don't want to be alive anymore. I wish he would just kill me. So growing up and hearing someone you love and look up to, he's my older brother, like, someone you want to be like and admire and think of as the coolest person and the best person in the world, to have to hear them hurt and have to see them hurt and to not physically be able to help. Um, you know, uh, I could be there with them, and I can keep him company, and I can, get a laugh out of him every now and again. as a younger brother should. And he would tell me all the time that and to this day he tells me that, like, when you're in the hospital, like, the best part of your day is when somebody comes by to visit you. It's a very isolating experience. I can only imagine being a small child going through that all the way up into your teenage years and into adulthood. For me, yeah, it wasn't until I was about 16 that those things started happening to me as well. And I remember my brother saying, like, man, I really was hoping that you were just gonna, I don't know, continue to be special and not have to go through these things. I'm sorry that you're just gonna be very much like me. As I got older, yeah, the intensity got worse and the frequency of hospital visits got worse. I was still able to work part-time. I was, mostly because I had to. It's interesting. My brother, because of his extensive history with the disease, medically, recorded, when he applied for disability benefits as a minor, you know, it was just very much open shut because there wasn't really much the government could like say. Like, you look at his medical history and you're like, well, yeah, like, how is this kid supposed to like hold down a job? He tried, I think, working a job for like 3 days, and just couldn't make it through. So he had a different road with that. I, on the other hand, had this problem of, well, most of your, life prior, you were fine. And I've been working since age 16, even though that's about when things started for me. And so when I applied, I got denied multiple times. I wouldn't get approved until I was in my late 20s, maybe early 30s, because I had to get a lawyer, a gentleman who's no longer with us, who had sickle cell anemia and was a lawyer and was able to, able to fight that fight for me and with me, and knew exactly how to approach the system. And I finally was approved, but it was very odd. Um, my father had passed in 2013. When I was in my early 30s, and yeah, it was interesting then too, because my older brother and my mom would get survivor benefits, right? Because my dad had worked a long time and been put into the system and all that. But because I was approved as disabled as an adult, um, afterwards, I was no longer a dependent, right? So according to the law, I'm not entitled to survivor's benefits. So it's this interesting thing to like have a sibling that has the same disease, and it's this blessing and this curse, right? In the sense of, like, obviously we both wish neither one of us had to deal with this, right? We both wish both of us could just live healthier lives. But the blessing, the silver lining, if you will, is that we don't have to go through it alone. Um, to this day, when I talk to Ray, I'm like, we share information about what we're going through, and that's something we really had to learn over time. And shout out to our mom, because growing up, our mom was really the advocate. She was the one who educated herself the most about the disease. She was the one that was home with us as we were sick. She was the one in the hospital with us as we struggled through those times. It's a little different one for me because by the time I was starting to have problems, I was just living with my dad in a different state. But even then, if something rough happened, she would come up from St. Louis and come visit me. Now she lives in North Carolina, and where she grew up, and still, she's always checking in on us and making sure we're okay and doing the right things. But I think our mom taught us to take care of ourselves, right? Our mom was the most attentive about, like, and the most, but also with that, the most fearful, because to be a mother of children who have this debilitating disease, and to watch them struggle, to watch them catch all these infections and go through all this pain and see them struggle. She was the one who was the most protective, the most educated, but also the most afraid for us. And I think to some degree, some of that fear may have infected us a little bit about like what we can and can't do. Our dad, he was, just he'd always been such a healthy, like hardworking man. And he worked in business marketing for over 25 years, and he was an athlete. And both parents were athletes. My dad was a football player. My mom was a cheerleader. So he just didn't really know what it was to get sick, like seriously. And his empathy was less when we were younger. It really was hard for him to wrap his head around, why we would not just be able to power through, right? Mind over matter, and just push through and be strong. And he didn't get it. I would say around the time I was like maybe 8, 9 or so, he started to get what are called cluster headaches. It's a neurological condition. Cluster headaches are, if you're familiar with migraines, it's like that times 10. It's just it's really some form of torture. And so like at that point, when he started, being brought to the ground and couldn't get up, and like was in tears, and like I never seen him cry before, like all these things, and had to go to the hospital, I think he started to develop more of an empathy for, oh wow, that's to be in so much pain that you can't do anything for yourself. That's an experience. And so he started to soften. He still would struggle off and on, even in my teenage years. But as I got older, what I did appreciate about my dad, and he did soften overall. He did come to understand what this disease was, and how much we went through, and how strong both of us were and are. He's again no longer with us, but before he died, he definitely got it. And I think the silver lining there, the fortunate thing we both got from our dad, was that he did push us to do more, and he did believe that we could do more. And I think between both parents, we got a parent who taught us to care for ourselves and pace ourselves and prioritize our wellness. And then we had another parent who encouraged us to not wait for a day that we felt good to get things done, and to to achieve more, and to keep going forward. And so even though they didn't always necessarily get along, it was nice to have those two different perspectives, because I think that helped both of us as we got older. But yeah, the relationship with pain medicine and hospitals and things of that nature, I'll say that again, just as the previous speaker was talking about, most people just don't understand. And I can testify to this, because as a kid who was near asymptomatic, I didn't understand until it happened to me, right? I felt bad for my older brother. There's a sense of sympathy in that. Like, dude, that sucks. I hate seeing you like this. But to understand what it is, to have it, to live with it, to the psychological toll it takes. These days, my older brother got in a program called apheresis treatment. And apheresis, for those unfamiliar, I don't know what was said before I got on, but apheresis is a process through which, sorry, I live by a fire station. But it's a process through which you take some of the blood out. Essentially, you get hooked to a catheter, very similar to dialysis in a way. They take out so many units of your damaged, red blood cells, and they separate the damaged red blood cells as much as they can. They feed what they can use from your blood back in, and through another tube in the catheter, they infuse someone else's healthy blood. So I get like every 28 days, I get maybe at this point 10 to 11 units of someone else's healthy blood. It's gone up over the years, 7 to 8, 8 to 9. Now it's like 10 to 11. My elder brother's been doing it longer because he had a stroke when he was in his early 20s. It was pretty terrifying. He had come out of his room once, and we were living with our dad at the time, and he'd come out of his room, and he'd been sleeping all day, and he was just mumbling, and nothing he said made sense. And I got really scared, and I recognized the signs of stroke, and I was just like, all right, we're getting you to the hospital. Me and one of our adoptive brothers, one of our found brothers, took him to the hospital. And thankfully he was able to recover, but even to this day, he has complications from that stroke that are just starting to pop up now. So that got him in the program. Apheresis can help be preventative for those who have suffered a stroke. I got in because I got in the summer of, I think, 2014. Sorry, I don't know if I'm good on time, but the summer of 2014, I had bilateral pneumonia and acute chest in the same summer, only like 3 months apart. And when that happened, they're like, okay, we can introduce you to this program to be preventative for infection. So what I will say about the hospital program is that sometimes you meet some people who are some professionals who are really empathetic and really striving to help you be the best you can be. Which hematologist you pick is huge. You need a hematologist that really understands what sickle cell disease is and really has a great empathy for it. But unfortunately, I've also had experiences where medical professionals, nurses, doctors, even certain hematologists do not really know what the disease is, do not have that empathy, do not understand the importance of making sure that you're hydrated, making sure you get the pain medicine that works for you, because everyone's different. They'll have like a little book, a little kind of playbook of what you do for pain. That's like a general kind of playbook, and they'll play by that. And you have to explain to them over and over again, like, no, well, I have sickle cell anemia. I deal with pain all the time. Your standard issue, low level, pain medicine is not going to 1 milligram of Dilaudid or oxycodone is not going to help me because of my tolerance. Those things are the discussions you end up having. And like I said before, making sure that your support system understands, making sure that, your friends understand to some degree that you can't always be there. You can't always do things that you had planned. And I'm at a good point in my life now where even, because a good gentleman talked about this in the transitions program, even people you work with will start to need to know what you're dealing with, because otherwise you just look very flaky and nobody understands why you're not there. And so it's hard to be that vulnerable. It's hard to let people in. It's a very debilitating disease, and it's hard to let people see you be in pain. But it's important that you trust the process, you trust yourself as you find people, and talk to people, have a community, be plugged into sickle cell programs like Cayenne Wellness Center or the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, and, figure out, how you can navigate these things, because a lot of these things that feel embarrassing and isolating happen to a good chunk of us. And so it's good to get that information, and armed with that knowledge, you can begin to discern who's going to show up for you and who's not. And it's okay that some people are not, but you find the ones who will, in your friend group, in your families, and also professionally. I'm an actor and a video game streamer and podcaster. So I work in the world of entertainment. And again, it's not great to go into a room and, have them see you as defective, and like, oh, well, can we give him this part because he might get sick, or whatever. But I've come to find, slowly but surely, I'm finding those who are working with me despite knowing that there's something medically wrong, whether they know the gory details or not. They see me wearing my mask all the time. They see that, I struggle sometimes. And there are still those who admire my work ethic, enjoy the work that I do, and are willing to work around what I'm dealing with.
Thank you, Philip. You have brought out some points that I'm definitely going to start with. So if we could bring all the panelists back up, that would be great. Your explanation for apheresis was spot on. Most people don't understand that apheresis is something that is available for individuals who have sickle cell disease because every sickle cell center or treatment center doesn't have it available. So let me introduce myself. So I'm Dr. Janice Nelson. I'm an adult nurse practitioner who have worked specifically with adults with sickle cell disease for the last 20 plus years. And I run a comprehensive sickle cell center in Connecticut where we have over 400 adults who have sickle cell disease. So we do provide apheresis therapy. It's always been a part of our program, so I understand, and it does really impact in a great way individuals and their health. So kudos, because you nailed that explanation. I've had medical professionals who botched that horribly. Fantastic explanation. It is very exactly what you said. They specifically are removing damaged red blood cells and replacing it with healthy red blood cells. And depending on what your tolerance is, what your body weight is, what your disease and all of those kinds of things depends on how much blood you will need. And so over a period of time, yes, like Philip said, you may need more blood or you may need less blood, but you need someone who's experienced watching that to make that determination whether or not you're meeting a goal. So when we say a goal for apheresis, we're talking about a specific number. The goal is to keep your hemoglobin S percentage less than 50% so that you're not sickling. So that's a wonderful segue into our panel presentation. Thank you so much for joining us, Philip. I don't know what happened to Noah. He might have fallen off, but there he is. He's come back to us. So during this presentation, there were some things that were said that we're going to hopefully in the next 30 plus minutes quickly go through. So one of the things that was said, and Shirley brought this out, was the ability to recognize sickle cell disease pain from other pains. You all have different sickle cell diseases. You all present your sickle cell disease differently. Briefly explain to us in like 30 seconds or less, are you able to distinguish when you're having sickle cell pain versus, oh, I was out in the garden and I did too much and I may have just injured myself from doing stuff that I don't normally do? And each one of you, please address that. Thank you. Start with Philip.
Oh, cool. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Sickle cell pain is very unique. I like the way that I hope I'm saying it right. Nilda explained it. It is throbbing. It is sharp. It's like it radiates. It's like if you had like a glow light that was pulsing, it feels like the pain just kind of moves like that. And so the only time I've ever been fooled, the only time I ever thought that, oh, this might be sickle cell pain and it wasn't, was when my gallbladder had too many gallstones and I was brought to the floor and I was like, oh my God, do I have a sickle cell crisis in my abdomen? But every other time, like, it doesn't feel like stubbing your toe or getting hit or, even a bad headache or anything like that. It's very unique.
Nilda?
Sickle cell pain is traveling many times. It travels. Sometimes it starts with a slow tempo and then it builds up to being very intense. But when you have bone pain, it's a very aching. Sciatic pain is very sharp. So each diagnosis has its own type of feeling. Gout is very similar in sickle cell pain, but what makes a difference is that gout, you can actually say it's from here to here. And just saying that it is very focused in a specific area can let the medical team know that this is not a sickle cell pain. But sickle cell has different levels of intensity as to pains from different organs of your body are more, I would say, intentional in that area.
Thank you. Noah? Nope, Noah's gone. Shirley?
Yeah, for me, there is, as I mentioned, that distinction. And my body actually gives me a very specific warm up or warning sign. And it is I've shared this with other warriors, and I haven't encountered anybody who had the same exact introduction to a potential episode. But I started getting this throbbing, pulsating down my spine, and it just kind of starts to get a rhythm. It's not pain yet, but it's like a precursor. And that's very that almost always precedes an episode for me. And then when an episode occurs, it's definitely a very specific type of pain, like Nilda said, and Philip. It's not like stubbing your toe. It's not like a sciatica or anything. It is very unique and distinctive, and the intensity of it can it just be overwhelming. And sometimes for me, it even I have a it evolves. And recently, in more recent years, I've had pain episodes that feel like almost shocking, like, oh my God, what was that? You know, just like, bam, something just kind of like somebody took uh, one of those big construction forks like that. It's just like, trying to snatch out a part of me. And so, yeah, it's very different, and and like Nova said, it moves around where other types of pain, you know, is very localized.
Okay.
And so it could start anywhere and shift and just kind of move around your body, and it lasts at different intervals, sometimes hours, sometimes days, sometimes a week or more.
That's an important distinction to make too for people who aren't aware. Sickle cell disease oftentimes is thought to be a limited process. Well, typically it is. You're hopefully able to get hydrated, get some pain medications, get you through that process, but it can linger in some people as well. Noah, what's your experience?
For me, uh, to do a deep dive into differences between acute crises and chronic pain. And I think the acute crisis for me has always been explosive, and uh, just disruptive, edgy, sharp, heavy. And then for me, the chronic pain, because it's been in my bones, I've always felt as if any sudden movement could break my bone, or I was just far too fragile. I would even say, uh, like I said earlier, it feels as if something is trampling on me, or when I take a step, that just like a fragile glass, anything can just shatter and I can just fall to the ground. That's the best way I can put it right now.
That's wonderful. One of the things that you did was you just gave us some descriptors for pain. And as a provider, one of the things that I'm asking for from my patients is tell me, is it throbbing? Is it burning? All of those descriptors, even though it may be difficult for you to express it, is important for me to know as a provider how to address your pain. Because if you're having burning sensations, then there's a certain kind of medicine that's going to be more effective than a different kind of medicine. So your ability to be able to describe your pain as deeply or uh, as accurately as you can only help us to be able to provide better or more adequate pain relief for you. So knowing those descriptors are really, really important. As Nilda mentioned, using that pain scale, you know, is your pain a 1 to 10? If it's a 100, tell me it's a 100. And that's going to let me know for you that this is not a typical pain episode. And so we may need to do something different. But all of the information that you're able to share with me is going to be able to help me to be able to help you. So those are really important distinguishments. And I have to apologize because I know that you guys don't always experience people who are like me, who are willing to be there and help with you and get you to the next point. Which is why it's important for me to engage in these discussions with you. How do we get the next group of providers to, as Philip mentioned, they use a little book. I don't have a book. Okay. My book comes from our discussions, our back and forth, our feedback, what your previous experience has been, what worked for you in the past, what didn't work for you, for us to come up with what's going to work for you, hopefully this time, because every time you have a pain crisis, it's a little bit different. And every time I need to realize that it's a little bit different. And so my engagement with you needs to be different. How do we help providers who aren't me to be empathetic and more engaging to meet your needs? What do we need to do to get them to that point? 2 points from each of you, and let's start with Noah this time.
Thank you, Doctor. It's a great question. I think the two things that I have said to my hematologist is um, listen to me and believe me. I feel like I'm the best person. I live in my body. I may look well, I may look handsome, or all of the qualifications, but if I'm telling you, I feel a certain way, and or this even comes down to like the treatment, like or an experience with other doctors. But I tell them, listen to me, believe me, and also really trust that I am very, very aware of my body.
Excellent. Shirley?
For me, fortunately, I have an excellent hematologist who's very well informed and very compassionate. But I have not always had that, and so I've had to try to um, explain the process of what works for me in a way that is respectful but assertive. It can be challenging when you have a doctor who doesn't really get it, but for the most part, I've been fortunate. I have taken the number two thing I would say is my medical home has for the last 6 years maybe has been a teaching hospital, Keck USC in Southern California, and so there have been several opportunities where teams come in, people who are in their internship or residency, where I have the opportunity to kind of nip in the bud any preconceived notions and stigmas and stereotypes that may have made way for them down the road. So, as far as drug seekers and all that, and I've always got an excellent response and great appreciation for being able to share them while I'm laying in a hospital bed. And so whenever we have an opportunity for to be in that kind of environment, seize it and just really uh, take make use of this teaching moment.
Great. Nilda?
So 2 points is the first is to have a pain plan. So know what is my pain regimen at home, what is the pain regimen at the clinic, and what is my pain regimen if I am admitted at the hospital. Because all three are very different. Once I come to you, I'm at the point where my home meds are not functioning and the methods that we can do at the clinic are not enough. And therefore, also trust. You trust in knowing who your patient is and knowing your patient. Know that if I have no family, so if I'm here, it's because I need to be here. And so knowing who you are, what you do, similar to the donors, when you have a patient that needs a transplant, that panel gets to know who the patient is and if they're worthy of that organ. And the same respect should come from a physician to a sickle cell patient. Remove the sick out of the sickle and see for who I am.
Excellent. Philip?
Yeah, my G points are advocacy and visibility. So here's the ugly truth is that, because sickle cell anemia is a disease that affects a very small margin of the American population. Like when I was, I think like in my early 20s or 30s, it was like less than 0.2% of the population had sickle cell disease. On top of that, you have the factors that it mostly affects Black and brown people, right? So unlike cancer, unlike multiple sclerosis, unlike some other diseases that have a lot of visibility and have a face attached to them, because of racial stigma and other, financial stigma, all other factors, we are underseen and therefore underheard. And so the biggest thing for me is that thankfully I've had my second mom, my adoptive mom, the found family I have, she's a nurse practitioner. She ran a pain and palliative care program for over 20 years. So she took advantage of the fact that, like, okay, well, I have Philip. I'm going to bring him to work, and we're going to have a panel about this. This at this hospital that predominantly serves white patients or whatever. We're going to let them know, like, from the sickle cell patients I can gather, what is it like? What we're doing now, like, what is it like? How'd you grow up? What does it feel like? How do doctors treat you? What's the most frustrating part of your care? Having those open discussions, and I literally did this last year on my stream. I stream video games on Twitch, and so I had a 7-day event to fundraise for Kyan Wellness Center, and every day we talked about the different aspects of the disease. And while we did not raise my goal, the most rewarding part was so many people came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for letting me know about. I didn't know this disease existed." Like that's 2024, and people still don't know sickle cell disease is even a thing. So the more we can get in front of groups of people, both internally at hospitals or even in public events, and let them know that, hey, I'm a real person. I have hopes and dreams and fears and joys and desires just like anybody else, and I deserve to be treated as such. That's huge. And then advocacy, because with the visibility, you need backup. Unfortunately, when I moved to Los Angeles, I started going to a hospital that did not treat me well with their sickle cell program or lack thereof, and so I had gone to USC, the Cancer Institute, the Comprehensive Cancer Center, and initially that was recommended by Kyan Wellness, because not being from California, I knew that I was going to have to find medical support first, or I couldn't move. So, I talked to Sickle Cell Disease Association. They pointed me to Kyan Wellness. Kyan Wellness recommended a very specific hematologist at that hospital. Unfortunately, she was aging out. She was about to retire. So once she retired, I was just in the hands of physician's assistant, and eventually transitioned to a different hematologist who had less experience. And so my experience there was horrific. I don't have time to share the stories, but I would just say that, every visit, every month, because I get apheresis, was a fight to just be heard and understood and be taken seriously, and say, like Noah was talking about, I am the expert on living with sickle cell. Like, I'm trusting all of you to be part of my team to understand the science of it, hopefully better than I do. I'm really relying on you for that. But I am the only expert in living with the disease inside of my body. And at that point, I had like 37 years of experience. And it's like, why is this an argument? So, yeah.
Thank you so much. One of the things that Shirley said was palliative care. And so everybody doesn't understand what palliative care is, but palliative care is a specialized form of medical care that focuses on improving the quality of life for people who have serious or chronic illnesses. So having palliative care be a part of your regular sickle cell disease care is not oh my God, they're going to die, because people often associate palliative care with hospice.
Right.
Hospice and palliative care work together because palliative care is providing care for chronic illness. So we need to get away from the stigma of hospice when we talk about palliative care, because palliative care in sickle cell disease can actually create more empathy, can actually create roads for advocacy, and help people to experience better healthcare. So I just wanted to throw that out there. One of the questions that I have for you guys, because we're gonna have to talk about drugs. We haven't talked about drugs. Is so in transition of care. Noah mentioned this, that when you grew up, you had a great pediatric experience, not such a great experience transitioning to adult care, having grown up here. Give us 2 points that we could take back to our pediatric providers and to our adult providers. Maybe it's the same message that can help that transition to be less burdensome and easier, because I know that we have a great transition program at our hospital. We have literally a 99% transition rate, meaning since 2007, we've lost one patient that transitioned that we haven't been able to follow up and figure out where they are. And so you have to have people who are invested. Our social worker is like a bulldog. She will hound you. Get in here for an appointment. Do you need a taxi voucher? Do I need to come and pick you up and bring you to the doorstep so that you can get into adult care? Because we realize that transition period is the period where you guys are most vulnerable. That's where people die. We don't want people to die. We want people to get engaged into care so that they can live to be 70, 80, 90 years old. So what can we collectively do to help improve transition from pediatric care to adult care? And I know that is a huge thing, but just two in 30 seconds or less. Let's start with Nilda.
I was raised by Dr. Doris Weathers, raised in the medical community. And she spoke about the communication, and she introduced me to my future hematologist. So from a young age, I was already aware of who was going to be my physician. When I get older, and I think that's important for having both doctors know each other in the transition. I feel that if the medical community was not so divided, it would help, because we can have a team. If you already know, individuals that are going to have, like I mentioned, pulmonary illnesses, there should be referring physicians that should be part of your physician's roster for who you should see. I think there should be like a yellow pages, let's say, for the sickle cell community, to where the physicians know each other and can help each patient transition to their adult care. So it is the pediatric introducing you to your primary care physician as an adult that would improve that transitioning period, and also have a trust to where it is someone that is well aware of sickle cell, and it's not a stranger that you do not know, that has no recollection of what sickle cell is. Because again, we go from the walls that are painted in many colors to the blank walls. So knowing that it is a physician that was referred and is known gives you a sense of trust that this person is going to care for my child as they were as a child and now into their adult years.
Thank you. Philip?
Yes, building off of what everyone's been talking about, and one of my points before was like, having advocacy, having backup, right? So that's the huge thing, I think, in going from pediatrics to adult care. My mom, thankfully, my biological mom, was my first advocate. She just was not going to let Ray and I suffer. And she was going to cuss people out and fight and whatever to make sure that we were cared for. And she had to do a lot of that fighting by herself, but she did it. And that's incredible. But not everybody has that, right? So, and I think the big thing that even my apheresis nurse at my current hospital tells me is that, yeah, unfortunately, when you're a kid with sickle cell anemia, there is some empathy sometimes, because it's like, well, this kid's in a lot of pain. They're cute. They're crying. It's sad. Somehow that empathy evaporates when you come of age, and suddenly we're not sure if we believe you anymore. And so because of this, I really don't recommend, if you can help it, going to any hospital system alone as a child or an adult. I really recommend, again, having, if you can find there are advocacy groups like Access Advocacy here, and there are, obviously, if you can plug into the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, they usually have a network of people they can talk to that might be able to help you, back you up. Even a family member who gets it, or a friend who gets it, or a spouse who gets it. These things are huge, because when you're trying to explain what you're going through, but you're in pain and you're tired, and you don't always have all of the words, and you're trying to just focus on not collapsing and keeping your head straight, they're throwing all this stuff at you. And I've literally been thrown out of the hospital because I got two terrible doctors in a row. I went to the ER and then got a room, got a doctor who didn't see me, didn't give me my pain medicine. He just couldn't be bothered. My nurse was like just watching me clutch my right leg, no, my left leg, and just watching me clutch my leg, and just in absolute pain, and just she was horrified, but could barely could get the doctor to give me pain medicine. Finally did, and when I got to the ICU, that doctor, she was even worse. Unfortunately, white woman, and just no empathy whatsoever. And when I started to get pain medicine, I was finally able to sleep. And she's like, "Oh, well, if you could sleep, you can go home. Like, I'm not gonna have you here just so you can pass out, and like that's not what you're here for." I tried to explain that that's not how my disease works, and that just because I can sleep doesn't mean I'm out of this crisis. She didn't care. She discharged me in my sleep, without my signature, and my brother had to come get me. So, these are the things that you are up against if you go in alone.
Thank you for sharing that. That's horrible, absolutely horrible. And we have to figure out how we prevent those isolated incidences from happening, because unfortunately they happen all over the place and they shouldn't be happening, but they do. Noah?
Two quick things to address one of the things that Philip said. Um, Going back to journaling, write these things down, make complaints, make suggestions. If you are in a city or a state where your hospital doesn't have a transitional program, make the suggestion, volunteer, give them an example of what this looks like and how it can be achieved. And then also, um, change your posture and how you advocate for your care. And what I mean by that is don't come in with the mindset of, oh, these people won't help me. Come in with the mindset of, no, you have to help me. And if you don't know how, let's go up to your higher ups and let's also connect you to other doctors. Here's a list of resources that you can call to figure out how to develop this thing here, or else my life is in jeopardy. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. That's important as well. Shirley?
Yeah, I would I don't have much to add to what's already been said. I kind of would agree with those things. The transition for me was just kind of out there. I grew up in North Jersey, outside of New York. I left there when I was 18 at that age into adulthood, went off to college in DC, and I was on my own. And so I didn't really have a hematologist before I left home. It was just ER. We didn't really have a lot of information and training and insights into how to navigate the sickle cell experience. So I was kind of on my own, roughing it. I had no sickle cell support groups. I didn't. So I think the key, based on my experience, is to have parents educated in the importance of being proactive and developing a transition plan for their child before they reach that age of independence, and making sure they find a good hematologist before they leave home, before they reach adulthood, and have the proper protocols laid out in advance, and hopefully, like Nelda said, or I'm not sure who, but have some transition plan in advance, have the pediatric hematologist have someone that they can refer the patient to, if they're going away or just becoming independent adult. So proactivity and a transition plan would make a world of difference. That would have made a big game changer for me.
Oh, if one more thing, if I may,
Sure.
just based on that and what Nilda shared as well, and what Noah shared. Yeah, I think something some doctors I've talked to before have talked about is that there isn't a universal standard of care for sickle cell anemia, right? Like if you're a cancer patient, there are certain things that just have to be done procedurally. And we've been trying to, at certain hospitals, get more of that. Like we have like maybe a USB drive that has your information on it, and like, they can immediately see what your care plan is. But not every hospital is going to do that. And so I think that's more of like the national fight, is sort of like, if we can find a way to demand and encourage a universal standard of like, if you have a sickle cell patient, you have to go through these steps. Every patient's going to be different, you have to do this checklist, to figure out what pain medicine works for them, how, how much, fluids they need. Like, you have to actually like listen and all these things. Like, I think because there's no oversight, it's just kind of roulette. You get the doctors you get. And I wanted to say that, like, I was fortunate for so many years that I didn't have to fight those fights. I found a good care team in the Detroit Medical Center, but coming here, and then there's no feeling in the world quite as disappointing as going to a place where you're supposed to be safe, where they're supposed to be taking care of you, and you assume as such when you enter the room, like, okay, I'm here, they're going to help me, and have to find out the hard way, oh no, they're not going to help me, so I have to make them hear me, right? That's terrible, so.
That absolutely is. And there have been several attempts to create exactly what you're talking about. So in 1999, the American Pain Society gathered all of the sickle cell disease giants at the time. So that was Dr. Lynette Benjamin, Dr. Ohene Frimpong, Dr. Charles Whitten. They all got together and they created American Pain Society Management of Sickle Cell Pain in 1999. That's when that was published. Then in 2002, the NIH, or the National Institutes of Health, with the Lung and Blood organization, created a 2002 guideline for the management of sickle cell disease, where it went through blood transfusions, pregnancy, pain, chronic pain, acute pain. That was a reiteration of that was created in 2014, where another group or panel came together and they had some consensus on what those guidelines recommendations should be. So now there's a National Alliance of Sickle Cell Centers who's working on creating that very same thing, trying to identify what a sickle cell disease provider needs to be recognized as a sickle cell disease provider, what a sickle cell disease center needs to be recognized as a center that offers management and care to individuals who have sickle cell disease. So there have been some groups that probably need to come together and work arm in arm in order to actually bring it to fruition. But there have been some people who have recognized that that challenge does exist, and that there has to be a coming together in order to make that happen. So in the last 4 minutes that we have, what I do want to address the opioid crisis. So now the opioid crisis, let's just call it what it was, brought about because there were young white men who were dying from drug overdoses because they were seeking pleasure, not because they had pain. And so that created a dynamic, because now you're trying to protect your young white guys from dying. So it created this legislation that made this document that said, hey, let's limit how people are given pain medicine. And who did it impact? It impacted people who had sickle cell disease. The people who it wasn't designed to impact, because you guys are not the people who are abusing the drug. Fast forward to here we are now. We actually have drug shortages that are occurring throughout the country. People are finding it difficult to find Dilaudid. People are now finding it difficult to find different formulations of morphine. And so because of all of this, looking at it from a not rose-colored, but a distorted lens, it has actually distorted what pain management should and shouldn't be. So in the past, methadone was a medication that was designed to prevent people who had opioid dependence. And they found by chance that, oh, it works great for pain relief. So they use that for pain relief. The same token, buprenorphine came about to circumvent opioid addiction. But what they found is that it actually blocks opioid receptors. And so it does provide pain relief, but there aren't enough people who are comfortable using buprenorphine as a way to relieve pain in individuals who have sickle cell disease, because of course it means you have to spend a little bit of time, you got to study a little bit, you got to do a little bit of training, you got to get comfortable with what the doses are, how you go about putting it on. You can't just give it to somebody and say, hey, take this medicine and you're going to be fine. You have to give parameters. You have to say, hey, I'm going to start you on buprenorphine, but I need you to understand that if you are taking an opioid medicine, it could make you withdraw from the medicine. So there have to be time intervals. You have to be monitored. It is an excellent drug. The oral formulation works great, which is the buccal that Shirley was talking about in the mouth, or the sublingual that you put under your tongue. Butrans patch, you put it on your skin. It has different levels of medicine. It starts at 5 micrograms, goes up to 20. Beautiful, beautiful pain relief. What we have to figure out is, how do we get more people to become comfortable prescribing it? I prescribe it all the time. The providers in my clinic prescribe it all the time. But you all can't come to Connecticut to my clinic to get buprenorphine. So we have to make these kinds of things available outside of where we live. The last thing I want to say is that, and you all have said this in a different way, is that you have been told because you have sickle cell disease that you are going to die at a certain age. So I will say what I always say is that expiration dates are for milk. We are people, we are not milk, and none of us should have an expiration date. So with that, I want to thank you for joining Cayenne Wellness and our talk on language of drugs. Thank you all, Philip, Nilda, Noah, Shirley, for participating today. And I hope those of you who have been in the audience has learned something, or if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're available to answer your questions. Thank you and have a wonderful day wherever you are in the country. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.